Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here. Again, thank you very much as always for taking the time to join me for this episode. And today I'm joined by leadership mentor, author, radio show host and keynote speaker Marnie Swedberg, who is here to discuss her framework called the ABCs of success. I could really be using some of that roundabout now, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Marnie's history includes fires, floods, a tornado, car wrecks, business setbacks, a burglary, lightning strike, ambulance rides, and more. And she models comeback behaviour, possibility thinking, and profound faith in her journey. That's quite the journey so far. Marnie owned and operated businesses in the restaurant and retail industries for over a decade and now is the web hostess of www.womenspeakers.com, the largest online directory of Christian women speakers in the world. And this website connects event planners with speakers from every experience level, fee range and denomination, and currently features over 1,700 speakers. As a public speaker herself, Marnie has solo-circumnavigated the globe, speaking 26 times at six conferences in 4 different countries, I should say, and she has presented for large corporations including Honeywell, Prudential and Pillsbury, for non-profit groups like Chambers of Commerce, professional women's groups, colleges and libraries, and for Christian women's retreats, conferences and other programs. Very, very impressive, Marnie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Very great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted, absolutely delighted. So quite the journey in there in terms of career and life experiences. Specifically, what parts of your journey inspired or helped you create the ABCs of success, which we'll get to in just a wee while here?
Well, I think the one thing that isn't on that whole long bio is that I really struggled through school. I really could not read until I was an adult. I had memorized a lot of words. I would take time to sound out words, but I was not really a reader. So that was so challenging, trying to go through school with everybody around me being able to just quickly consume and understand words and me not being able to do that. I feel like that forced me to look at the world through a different set of lenses, find ways to do things faster and better because I needed more time to do the reading part of things and the comprehension. So I feel like our weaknesses actually can oftentimes be the reason for our strengths later. And we also know that it's conversely true that our greatest strength will always be our greatest weakness as well. For example, a person who loves to be very organized and have things very well set up in advance has a much harder time to be flexible than someone who's always running late. You know, their life is flexibility. That's all they can really do. So we find that these strengths and weaknesses go together hand in hand. And I do believe that that's why I've been able to do as many different things as I have and to help others be able to see through a different lens to address their challenges that they're facing today.
Yes. And in terms of how does that manifest itself into success, what I think I'm hearing from what you were saying was success will mean different things to different people at different points or vantage points in their life. Am I on the right track?
Right. And you have to even define success for yourself. No two people will define success the same way. Some people, they could have all the money in the world, and if their children didn't love them or value them, that would be just an utter failure. Other people, their radar is very different. So I think even the uniqueness of you, that's one of the things I focus a lot on in my leadership training and mentoring, is that you are completely unique from any other person. You may have similarities, but even if you're a twin, and I sat across the table one time from a fingerprint expert from New York City. I was at a conference and I said, "What about twins? How hard is it?" And she goes, "It is hard, identical twins." She said, "But I can always find something." And that's just 1 inch of your body that you can be distinguished even right down to that in 1 inch of your skin. So we know for sure that the way that you're approaching life, the way that you're thinking about things, the way you're seeing things, this is going to radically affect your outcomes and how things go for you.
Yeah, definitely. One of the key things from your bio when I was prepping for today's chat was the concept of possibility thinking. And I know I went over it fairly quickly during your bio, but those words really resonated with me in terms of the possibility of possibility thinking.
Mm.
Can you elaborate a wee bit more on where that fits and sits with your offerings?
Yeah, so I'm going to just use the example of the day that we had a restaurant that was located about a mile away from our retail store. And we had a terrible storm that came through the city. And at our restaurant, a tree was struck right exactly outside the property that completely took all of our electronics offline. And
Wow.
over at the store, simultaneously, we had flooding coming in the back from the alley. So we had these two major disasters going on at the same time in the morning of a regular workday. And what was amazing was that that day somehow still worked. We were able to set up backup systems in the restaurant to make it go. And all the way to the point that at the end of that same exact day, we had done a full day of business at both businesses, and a friend of ours, had come and chopped down the whole tree and taken away all of the debris, all in one day.
Wow.
So when you don't have to freak out, what happens is that you're able to think creatively. Things will come to your mind. Like I remembered his name happened to be Gary too. And he loved cutting down trees. And that was one of his favorite things to do. And he was always looking for firewood for their family's fireplace. And that thought just came to me midday. And I just thought I should just call and see if he'd be willing to, interested. And he's like, yeah, I'll be right over. And that's kind of how that went. I just, another time we had a burglary at the restaurant, and we were out of town actually. And one of the employees from the other business drove by, saw it, contacted us, and then we were able to, through them, before we even got home, everything was done. The police had been contacted, the windows had been replaced. I mean, it was like when you don't have to freak out, when
Yeah.
you're okay being who you are, doing what you're here to do in the world, you'll find that even the biggest challenges can be navigated with a semblance of peace and grace.
Yeah. And how would you say how could one learn, let's you've done enough of the freaking out and that's served you in a certain way. And if you shift more to a possibility mindset, the ability to navigate this from a clearer headspace perspective, is that something easily learned? Is that something where you have to go through the freak out stuff before it resonates more? What's your experience been in that?
It's so all over the board, Gary. And I love, there's a doctor named Andrew Young. He has a podcast, the way things are supposed to be. I can't remember now the name of the podcast exactly, but he talks about different people coming at this in such a different way. So a person who was raised in a very stable family with loving parents and a pretty decent, upbringing, their standard is going to be like, here, let's say if it's a halfway point, let's say it's at the halfway point. And then they experience highs above that, lows below that. And all of us just assume that everybody's at the same level, whatever we're at. But the reality is, he was talking with a gal who'd come out of a war-torn country abroad, and her status quo, her level was down at like his 25 to 30% level. That's where she started. She experienced highs and lows from that level. This made a lot of sense to me. And I think it's important for us to recognize some people have been trained from very young that freak out is the response. It's going to be a lot harder for you to move toward peace, move toward faith that things can work out for you than someone who has pretty much lived a life, at a good level, having been modeled that behavior from the time they were young. So I can't say if it's going to be harder or easier for you, but I will say it's definitely worth the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. It really strikes a chord for me in terms of when I was doing my initial coach training, to become a certified coach, one of the first things I remember from this intensive module 1 workshop that I did was they kept blending into the conversation. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And at the time, it's kind of overwhelming. You're trying to learn something new. You're trying to show up well. You're trying to be the best that you can. And what they were really saying, depending on the context of the conversation, was, don't worry about it. Don't force it. Don't compare or contrast your experience or your abilities versus other people. Your journey is completely different. And if you make it about you and give yourself the grace that you are exactly where you're supposed to be for right now, and you get to control this moment and every moment afterwards in terms of how much one can control something, of course. But it really, really resonated with me because, there have been times in my life where I have had a hard time and I've very easily slipped into, I wouldn't say so much freak out mode, but certainly some victim mentality there where why me, why always me, why can't I cut a break or, whatever it is. And generally my demeanor is relatively happy over time, but I've had those moments and it was so true, Marnie. At the time for them to say and keep reinforcing it, I think was the key for me, to say you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So you're the sum of everything that's happened thus far. Look at the experiences you've got. Look at the experiences you've given or been part of. And these are gifts that you can use for creating value and impact going forward. It really, really resonated with me. I think that's probably why the possibility thinking, it became a little bit of a kind of a trigger for me to say, I need to find out more about that.
Yeah, I love what you said there. I think that a way that I like to say it is God doesn't waste anything. And how, when you're thinking of a garden, you even put manure or something in the garden to make it grow better.
Yeah.
And when we think our lives are all supposed to be just always smooth sailing and no challenges ever, it's just not going to be that way. The challenges are actually, if you think of a tree that's grown up in violent windstorms will be a tree that won't fall easily.
Mm.
And that's why when we started this conversation, I said, I feel like one of the reasons I get to do so much with my life is because of the hardships I had as a child, learning how to read, learning how to get through school. Those difficulties all the way growing up for those early years of my life caused me to be able to be a much stronger person who can look at things through a different lens than other people. And your challenges that you've been through, everybody listening, your challenges, this is going to be the differentiation between you and other people because you see the world differently. And that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely, it is 100%. It really reminds me of something I've been saying more and more recently. And I think saying it out loud to reaffirm it for myself is everyone's experience, even in and of the moment, is going to be completely different. So there could be a dozen people listening to this simultaneously at any given point in time, and each one of them is absorbing the information different and experiencing it and manifesting it and going to use it for something completely different. The same when you're doing your speaking, whether it's virtual or in person, you can have 150 people in the audience and each will be having their own unique experience. And I say that not to overwhelm, to try and think about how do I satisfy 150 different people having a different experience, but it's almost it becomes freeing, to let it go, to say you are absolutely obligated to have your own experience here and don't feel selfish about it and really immerse yourself in it. And I would love to hear from you afterwards as to exactly what your experience was, because I know what I hope to give, but I don't get to control anything as soon as I transmit my words.
I love that. And it's back to, so the key then is for you, Gary, for me, Marnie, for you, every listener, to be fully who we are, fully comfortable in the skin that we're in, fully aware of that nobody else can present this information in the way that I'm going to. Nobody else can have, actually, the sound waves that are coming out of my mouth are so unique. Nobody else is going to be able to affect that audience the way you can. And you
Yes.
don't get to actually pick how they receive it. But as long as you are being fully, truly you, it's going to work out. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, the audience absolutely can pick up on authenticity or another version of you,
Right.
and people
Yeah.
want authentic every
Yeah.
single time. So, in terms of the ABCs of success, there is a wee bit of a bonus in here because we're not just confined to ABC. But I love the terminology. Tell me a bit more about the ABCs of success and what the major components are.
Yeah. So what happened is I was working with leaders all around the world and Olympians and presidents and companies, presidents of companies and different other leaders. And I realized that these people had things in common. And so I put together the ABCs. It's actually ABCDE, and we can just, hit the high points of them here today. We can't dive in too deeply to any of them, but I would love to share them with you.
Perfect. Excellent. A, let's go.
A. A is for assess and assign value. So two things. The first thing, everything that comes into your life has the potential for good and it has the potential for evil. So you have to assess as things are coming into your life, is this something I want to have in my life, that I'm willing to have in my life, that I think is a good thing, or is this something that I'm going to say no to? So you have to assess first. That's so important. Assess everything. And then if you decide you want to have it in your life, for example, it's a different position. You have had maybe a stay-at-home job, and now you're going to take a job that's going to require 1 hour commute each way. Wow, that's a big decision.
Yeah.
So you've assessed that overall, this is the decision that's going to be best for you and your family. So you say yes. But now you have to assign a value to that new thing. You've got 2 hours a day that you're going to be commuting. And what are you going to do with those 2 hours? Everything that come into your life is an opportunity for something new to happen. So you can either decide, I'm going to start calling my friends and family on the drive, or I'm going to use it like a university in my car, or I'm going to take the bus so that I can actually read and watch things. Once you assign it value, that changes everything. Gabby Douglas was an Olympian, and she would say, the hard days are the days when champions are made. She assigned value to the days that she sprained her ankle, to the days that she broke her wrist. She assigned values to the worst things that none of us would want ever, but that came along with her decision to be a world champion. So as you're moving forward, you're going to have to make some decisions that are hard. And some of the decisions are going to come with things that seem like a downside, like a broken bone. But the reality is you cannot actually be fully who you are supposed to be, accomplish what you're supposed to be doing, unless you embrace both the thing you've assigned value to. And then you've said, yep, okay, everything that goes with that, I'm just going to reframe that. So currently I have something in my life that I want to do, but I don't want to do. One of those things, I'm going to change this behavior. I want to do something, but I actually don't want to do that. You know what I'm talking about? Any of the habits we ever have that we want to change, that's where we find ourselves. I really don't want to keep doing that, but I really, really want to do it.
Yeah.
And I heard a quote just today that I thought was so good. What I say no to today determines what I get to say yes to tomorrow.
Oh, yes. Love that.
So as we're assigning value, we want to remember this isn't only about the moment I'm experiencing, it's about the whole future.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And really taking that second step and assigning the value to it. The examples you provided were fantastic. And I was thinking, yep, I used to do that. Yep, I used to do that. Yep, I would do that if I had that opportunity. And it's so interesting, Marnie, because of late, my son, who's 16 right now, his world is expanding daily. Where he just got his driver's license, he's got his first car, he has all this independence that he didn't have before. I've suddenly become this inconsequential being that just happens to be in the same house as him for right now. But he's studying. He's a good student. He's studying. He has a new girlfriend. He has his car. He likes the sports. He took up rugby recently. He's got a keen interest in golf, which is quite interesting because we've dabbled in a whole bunch of things, and he's just interested in it. And there's times when he becomes overwhelmed. And I'm saying you have to pay attention to what you're doing in your life, because at some points in your life you had an abundance of time because you weren't quite as social. There weren't so many draws on your time. And you now have to make informed, intentional choices as to who gets your time and when. And hopefully you are number one on your list, so that everything else works out. But that assigning value is something, I haven't framed it in that way, but I think that would really resonate with him, to say, when you're giving up your time to go golfing, to be with your girlfriend, to sit and study, what are you giving to that, and what are you getting from that, and how does that move you forward? And if the answer is it's not, or I don't know, then you could go find out, or you can then make a different decision. But I think it's probably that deeper level of thinking, isn't it? Where it's not just sure, that sounds like a good idea, and then when you're in the middle of it, you're thinking, why did I even say yes to this? This is madness, it's that level of, you have the control, and certainly when it's decision-making stage, to really look at this holistically as to how this is going to serve me today, and exactly to your point, how does it help me help others tomorrow and the next day and the next day? And having that intentionality there, I think, is something that I'm going to talk to him about and see if that resonates with him. That's so powerful. It's not just saying yes or no, it's this is why, and this is how, and this is how I see it going, and these are the changes that I'm willing to make.
In my mid-30s, I think it was, I heard this phrase that really helped me, because I was still being a 16-year-old and just kind of going wherever the wind say yes to everybody that asks me anything. And I heard this phrase that helped so much. Every time I say yes to something, I have in effect said no to something else. And every time I say no to something, I have in effect said yes to something else.
Yeah.
I think this is a very difficult thing for us to learn. But the reality is when we make that truth our own mantra, it's much easier to say no to the things that are not serving.
Yeah, it really is. And it is a bit of there is still some weight to saying no, and it becomes a very difficult thing to do, certainly with certain audiences or people or organizations, whatever that looks like. And what I've been trying to, Leo is my son, what I've been trying to impress upon him is, if I'm ever saying yes or no, I typically add on, and I'm going to tell you why. And then it gives me an opportunity to verbalize the reason it's a no is we have these 3 other things. You committed to doing that. This does sound like a great opportunity, but commitments matter. Something like that, whatever the example is, but adding on that, and I'm going to tell you why, I hope eventually resonates to him, that when he has to say no to things that become a tug on the heartstrings, that he provides that qualification. Now, I know there are some people out there that say no is a complete sentence and things like that. I'm not 100% sure I subscribe to that, but I do understand the sentiment behind it. But giving that opportunity, especially for people that you respect, admire, love, care about, want to do right by, whatever that looks like, but just adding that other context to say, I'm going to explain it to you so that you know that there's been a level of thought and detail and planning and marrying in with my existing responsibilities, and it just doesn't work this time, but maybe it might work next time. So please don't hesitate to ask again. Those sorts of things.
I think what you said there is so good. And when you are a person of integrity and people know they can ask you, and when it works, you're going to, I think at some point you don't have to give them a reason anymore, because they just trust your logic. They trust your love of them. And that's a lot of it. Do you really love me? Do I matter to you? At the beginning though, and as a way to model it, when no is uncomfortable for either party, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So A, wonderful, I love it. Assess and assign value. B,
batch. And this is something that everybody who gets a ton done absolutely batches stuff. So you're already great at batching, because when you go to the gas station, you don't put a gallon in at a time. Actually, your leader, you fill it. because why would you want to keep going back, 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 back? And you don't make a dozen cookies, you don't make one at a time, you make a batch.
Yeah.
And so in the rest of our lives, there's ways to do this. And I love presenting this to groups of leaders because what they come up with is so crazy and incredible, but you can batch everything. You can batch times. So you only look at your emails a certain number of times a day. You can batch trips. So you only leave your house or leave your office if you have, multiple stops to make. You don't just do it in one, one here, one there, one there. Everything can be batched. So many things can be batched. And so just to actually take responsibility for the time and the energy that you have, batch anything that can go together, and then move forward like that with a plan. So batching is huge. A lot of people don't do it. A lot of people just, stuff hits them and they tackle it right then in the moment. And that's not very efficient if you're trying to get a lot done.
It really, it's so, you're so right. I couldn't agree with you more, Marnie, in terms of, for me, batching is a no-brainer. I'm thinking of course you would do that. Of course you would make 12 cookies. Of course you would do the 1 gallon. And those are extreme examples, of course, but in terms of managing and manifesting your time and making sure it's the most efficient use of your time, it's very, very sporadic for some. There might be the odd occasion where it just kind of works and you're like, oh, wow, now you're doing it. Now I'm doing what? What do you mean? It's kind of like that. Whereas, this podcast is a perfect example. At one point I was doing it just whenever it would fit into my schedule. And I thought, I'm not truly serving myself, which means I can't really truly serve other people. So then, as you know, it says I record on the first week of the month only, and it gives me the remainder of the month to package, to properly prepare, to get it out there. And it gives me the best opportunity to be in the best mindset, and hopefully provides a bit of predictability for the guests, because it was very, very inefficient. Because as you're switching and changing tasks, it's so inefficient to try and train your brain to get back to that. Okay, where was I? What was I doing? And then you finally get into a groove, and then something else happens and you're like, oh, go do that thing. And then, there's plates spinning around you, but there's a whole bunch that's crashing around you too. And those plates that are crashing around you could be ones that are very materially important to your life success as you go forward. Do you see, what do you think is the biggest challenge to people truly embracing batching based on your experience?
I think it's because you're just yourself. And so you don't take it that seriously. Like if you were in a hospital, you would have to do triage because you've got people who are going to die. If they don't get to the front of the line, they're going to die. And then you got other people who, broke their toe. They can wait a little while, So you've got, in other situations, you have a lot of pressure to figure this out and get it in line and organized. But I think a lot of people don't really value their own time that much in order to think it through like that, or haven't really thought about it like that. As you get busier, as your schedule fills with things that are truly important and priorities to you, you'll find that you really have to do some kind of organization at a different level than you've been doing before. And that's where I think batching is one of the low-hanging fruits on that one. You can really make some good progress by just looking at your schedule and saying, what things could I do together? During an interview like this that I'm doing with you right now, Gary, I have signs on the doors, the front door, the back door, my office door. I have signs on the door that say stop, urgent, live interview in progress. Okay. Yeah. I have other signs that I put out at different times that are just for on my office door only. And it'll say privacy requested, long process. You can actually block times on your calendar where you say, I'm not available at that time. It's not because somebody else is taking your time. It's because you've decided that something you need to do is equally important to something that someone else decided you needed to do. Now, this is taking management control of our own lives. And this is the difference between most people and presidents, Olympians, and CEOs. They don't get to that level by letting everybody else decide what they're going to do with their day. They get to that level by taking control of that and blocking out times for the things like your podcast, saying, I'm not going to do this all month, every day, anytime.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Perfect. C.
C, calculate. You need to actually calculate everything before you get going. The reason for that is because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to get some way down the road and you're going to find out, I should have never said yes to this. I should have never said yes to this. You think about a family who has a couple little tennis players, maybe use that example, and early on decided what they were going to invest into that. That the tennis family, they invested everything. That was just it. There was no amount that would be too much. That was what they were going to do.
Yeah.
Now you have a car. You're going to go buy a car. What are you going to do? You're going to look at what funds you have available. You are going to decide what kind of car you can afford based on the funds you have available. Well, a lot of times with what we're doing with our time, what we're investing our mental space into, our energy into, we don't assess it like that. We don't. We just go flying in and see how it works out. And again, when you've got somebody at a top tier level of production that's over either managing a lot of people or in the specific of an Olympian, now this person has the responsibility to represent a whole country.
Yeah.
It gets very clear what is and what is not the priority. And as you're looking to take on something new, whether it's an additional coach or whatever it is, you calculate what you think the cost will be and what you think the outcome will be. Yeah. And that's how people who are starting a new business should always look at that. I got a kick out of my daughter. We owned a couple businesses at the time, and my daughter was going through business school, college. And she was on a team and they were supposed to come up with a business plan. And she had worked in our business, so she knew how business actually worked compared to how it worked in her college class. Yeah. And she was laughing because she's like, it's so ridiculous. All we do is we just keep making the product more and more expensive until the numbers work. But of course, in the real world, people have an upper limit of what they're willing to pay for that product. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You actually have to calculate it reasonably and look at the reality of it and then make your decision.
Definitely. Absolutely. It's one of these, I think I've talked about this before, where even just from a time calculation perspective, how long is this actually going to take me? The example I typically use is I like to run, and I run multiple times per week, and I run roughly for about 30 minutes. So then in the early stages or the early days of taking my running more seriously, I would say it's only 30 minutes. So that's fine. And then I was wondering why my time at the other side was so sparse. And it's the time to, select my outfit, to see whether I need sunscreen or not, to set up the apps on my phone before I go, to select the music that I'm going to play, to do a semblance of a warm-up. That's not my forte, I have to say. And then afterwards, there's a couple of minute walk to cool down, then there's the stretching, then there's the ice bathing, then there's the shower. And it becomes an hour of an event, but I didn't fully appreciate that at the time because I wasn't truly calculating everything that goes into it. I was just specifically focusing in on the actual act of running. And I see that so many times with people in my life where they focus on one key part of it, which is important in and of itself, but if it's not really truly bundled with the actual stuff that has to happen to get that to the successful conclusion of some description, then you're already on the back foot before you even started.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Speaking about running, my youngest son is a runner. The first time in his early teens, the first time he went out for a run, he ran 6 miles just out the door. He's just a runner. He's just built like a runner and he loves it. Yeah. So he was in a 38-mile race out in Utah, out in the hills, which is just beyond me how that could even happen. But anyway, he was thinking of doing another race, but he was calculating it from experience, saying, okay, but I just don't have 20 extra hours a week now to prepare for a 50 or 100, what he wants to do next. So calculating is just going to bring it home to you. What is possible, what's not possible, what's reasonable. And then when you go do it, not only have you not wasted all the time that was never going to be able to have it work anyway. But you actually have committed ahead of time to your, you were saying it's only 30 minutes. So it's only an hour. And now you get to choose whether that's an hour you want to invest.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then you have that clarity and an ability to be able to communicate that to other people if you so choose, because you've thought it out, back to what I was saying earlier. Fantastic. D.
I love this one. D is delegate or do it yourself, but I always have the harder time with leaders trying to get them to delegate. Most leaders really feel like if I don't do it myself, it won't get done well. And there's some truth to that, actually. Nobody else can do it just the way you do it. So I have a funny screen that I pop up and I say, there are some things you just have to do yourself, and it's a couple getting married. Like there are some things you don't want to delegate.
Yeah,
you just have to do it yourself. But then there's all these things that you can delegate. And to help people understand how much you're already delegating, I just use a couple kind of silly examples, but honestly, most people don't grow all their own food, raise their own cows and chickens. They go to the grocery store. Mm-hmm. They pay what it costs to get it. Yeah. And they appreciate that service. Most of us don't have our own cotton fields and make our own silk. It's like we go to the store and we buy clothes. Mm-hmm. Most people do not hand deliver their mail or packages across the country. We use UPS and USPS and different mail services. So what the point is that as a leader, you are going to have to come to the point where you can delegate everything that you don't have to personally do. When we had the restaurant so we bought it when I was homeschooling our children, and my husband was still working corporate and he wanted me to manage it. And I was like, boy, I don't know how all this can work. And so we were about 3 months in, and the kids were teens, but we were about 3 months in, and he said, so how's it going? And I said, well, I think we're either going to have to sell the restaurant or quit homeschooling, but I cannot do both of these things. And he said, well, hold the range here. And he came up with a plan, and it was called the Send Marnie Home Bonus. And what that meant was if they would cover their own shifts, because the problem was not that I was on the schedule or supposed to be there more than I could be. That was fine. The problem was that somebody would get sick or in a car accident or whatever. They couldn't cover their own shift, and they would call me. And so we were running it like that. And he just saw that there was an opportunity for them to cover each other instead of always calling me. And so it became this, there were 18 employees, and it became this big thing where if they could just keep me off the floor covering their shifts, they would get a 6%, up to 6% bonus each month if they could keep me off the floor. And that's exactly what happened. It went down, and we kept homeschooling, and we kept running the restaurant, and it works. So when you think about delegating, you oftentimes, like for me, I was so busy, it didn't even occur to me. I would try to call a couple people, but I would run out of time, and I would just go cover the shift. So I'd work 7 or 8 hours instead of making a couple more phone calls.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you're busy, that's what happens, right? Yeah. So somebody else looking at it can help you see where you could maybe delegate. And then again, never, ever, ever delegate the things that only you should be doing. Gary, if you have this podcast and you decide you're going to delegate the interviews to somebody else, you no longer have a podcast.
Yes.
Somebody else has a podcast. Yeah. And if I decide I'm going to delegate showing up for the interview to somebody else, that's not going to work. There's all kinds of things like that only you can do. If your business or your whatever it is going to be the best it can be, only you can do some of the things. Yeah. Everything else can be delegated. And I use Upwork.com a ton. Some people use Fiverr or whatever. Just whatever you find that you can find help on Upwork, because I use it all the time. And I've used it for a long time. I have a training course that over at udemy.com that walks you through my system. But because I use it all the time, I can actually literally in the morning of a day go in and need an assistant to help me with a particular project that has an expertise that can be done virtually.
Yeah.
By the end of the day, it can be hired, maybe even done, depending on the project, with nobody on my staff to carry forward. So
Yeah.
there's ways for you to delegate. If it's a priority for you, find the ways that work for you, but start delegating. And I always use the phrase cost of doing business. I always use that phrase. That's just the cost of doing business. And if you want to grow, you're not going to grow past what you can do yourself unless you're willing to delegate.
Yeah. And it can become quite an emotive topic for certain people, because there are certain things that they would do. I've had this with coaching clients where when it gets to the point where I am that third party, or certainly a champion of theirs, in that third party lens, to say, have you considered this? What about that? What about that? Ultimately, it gets to a point where they say, I really like doing this part.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now we're getting somewhere, but how is it serving your greater purpose?
Mm-hmm.
How is it serving you moving forward? Is there something else that you could substitute that
right
with that you equally enjoy, and give someone else the joy that you experience with this? And it becomes difficult, for people to genuinely let go.
Yeah, and you can look at it both ways. Is there something I can give up that I really enjoy, that I'll be fine not doing, that somebody else would enjoy doing? Or the other way around, is there something that I can give up that will free me up to have enough time to do this favorite part of the business myself? Yeah, because you can look at it both ways. Outside help, like a coach or somebody here, is tremendously helpful. I still remember one time I was just overwhelmed. I just was crazy. Dave was going to go on a business meeting just for a day, a drive trip. And then he had meetings all day. And I thought, I'm going to go with him, and I'm going to be by myself, and I'm going to just figure this out, make a plan, and see where I can. And we had supper that night, and he said, so what'd you come up with? And I said, I think it's those rugs in the back hall. They're so dark that they show trash on them all the time. I can see the white length, and I think I should just replace those. And he goes, that's it? There's nothing else I could give up. And he goes, we're hiring you an assistant right now.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to have somebody else look at it with you and give you permission to do what you need to do.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I love that. E
is the last one. So it's kind of like a bookend. A is assess and assign value, and E is evaluate. Yeah. What happens is sometimes we've made a change, we're going along, it's working fine, and we just back burner it, and we never look at that decision again. And it's very important to continue to evaluate. I usually take a private retreat once a week, and it's usually anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. Sometimes it's up to 4 hours, where I don't take any technology with me. I just go and sit quietly with a notebook, and I say with God, and I just listen, and I'm still, and I just open myself up to anything that could be done better. And things come to my mind. Well, what about this? What about that? Well, how about this? And if you never evaluate, you really will stop growing. There will be a limit to your growth. And those quiet times for me, those retreats, changed everything. When I started doing that, it's wild, because you wouldn't think it could matter an hour a week or 2 hours a week. But the thing is that we get so busy, and we're just going, and never really thinking.
Yeah.
And it's super important to build in enough time to really think long enough so you can truly disconnect. I actually always leave the office. I never do this in my office. I always leave. I always go somewhere. I try to go somewhere beautiful, maybe even just the lobby of a hotel. I just go somewhere that's beautiful and different from normal. Yeah. And then I just give my mind and my heart time to think.
Fab, as you say, even that the power of that 1 hour, if it's 1 hour that you have, and the compounding positive effects that can have over time, where it becomes, that's one of the things that I have to do. That's non-negotiable. It's like me for my workouts, where I say, never a day goes by where I don't do something. And it's not to keep a streak going or in some way to prove how great I am or anything like that. It's something really important to me because it gives me think time. It is time. I know I mentioned that I program things into my phone, but I'm not on my phone. My phone is passively being consumed by me as I'm out pounding the streets, and it just flushes a whole bunch of poor ideas out and gives me some space for other ideas. And it's those sorts of those sorts of times that have given me so much processing time, you know, to really say, why am I even thinking about that? Why is that even a thing? Yes, it is a thing, but it's not a thing until next year. So why don't you talk about the immediate things, you know? And it's time that none of that would have come to me ever had I not had given myself the opportunity to receive that external or additional benefit of being outside. For the most part, it gets kind of wintry here in Calgary, so then it's on the treadmill, but on the treadmill it still has the same sort of effect where I'm giving myself that opportunity to be a bit outside the regular and use that. And sometimes I can do it intentionally to say, I'm going to think about this today, but most times it's very organic, and what happens.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people really miss so many opportunities by not looking at times like working out times. Or let's say for me, every week I'm going to be cleaning my house. And I've had times when I've had other people do that.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm doing it myself. That works. And during those times, I can either just be brain dead or, listening to a novel, or I can actually, on a Saturday, literally, I can sometimes listen through a whole book, a training book that takes me all the way thinking differently by the end of it than I came in, changes how I think about that thing for the rest of my life
Yeah.
because somebody took the time to write that book and share it with me.
Yeah.
So I think we have a lot more opportunities to grow and to develop the skills we have than we take. So I just encourage you, the ABCs are assess it and assign value, batch wherever you can. Remember to calculate before you take in something new. Delegate wherever you can, but then do the things that only you can do and keep evaluating.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Based on many, many years of engagements with people who have achieved success by doing those things. I love it. Marnie, as you know, this is the Best You podcast where I take this opportunity to ask every guest, what is one regular practice that you employ that gives Marnie the best opportunity to be the best version of you?
Oh, well, I would have said my retreat, I suppose, but I think because I already said that I get another one, I get a second. So I would say, for me personally, it's my spiritual life, making sure that I'm connecting with God all the time. And I call it the air of prayer. And so if you think of a dolphin is a water dweller, but an air breather. Okay. So the dolphin lives underwater, does all its work underwater, and then comes up for air every 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And we are actually spiritual beings. We were designed, our physical design needs spiritual air. We have to have it, or we start feeling like we can't breathe anymore, kind of like a dolphin would. And then some of us, because we were never taught how to do that, we ignore that part and we just kind of find things to fill that space, like drugs or alcohol or, whatever kind of thing you grab for when you feel out of sorts. Maybe it's anger, whatever it is. But what you're really needing in those moments when you feel that anxiety to grab for something, what you're really needing is a spiritual boost. And so I think breathing the air prayer for me is absolutely my favorite.
Fabulous. I listened to a Mel Robbins podcast recently, completely dedicated to exactly that topic of each human being is created as a spiritual being, and some people tap into it, some people don't. Here are the benefits if you do. And it was absolutely fascinating, to hear it, somewhat in a business context, or certainly in a human context, to come with new information, to say, I never really thought about it like that. And the fact that spirituality means different things to different people, and it doesn't have to be one size fits all, goes back to everyone's having a different experience, and you are uniquely you, and you get to choose what that looks like. So it's fabulous that you have that air prayer that gives you that opportunity to make sure that it's a constant in your life.
Yeah, I love it.
Excellent. Marnie, where can people find out more about you?
Well, I have the honor privilege of having my own name for my website. It's just Marnie.com, MARNIE.com. And I do host 9 virtual summits for women every year on different training topics. We've got, they're coming up all the time, whether you're a speaker or an entrepreneur or need marketing help or whatever you do, there's something there for you. So I'd love to meet you and get you plugged in.
Fabulous. Marnie, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you very, very much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Gary, so much fun. Thank you.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.